Hello, I'm Brian, and this is a very special edition of AAMI News In Conversation. We're here at AAMI eXchange in Long Beach, California. It's AAMI eXchange 2023. I've got some really exciting guests here today. We're going to be talking about consulting, and I'd really be excited for everybody to introduce themselves and your roles within AAMI as well. We'll start with Kurt.
Sure. Good morning, and thanks for having me here, Brian. I'm Kurt Fink. I'm with a company called Fink Clinical Engineering Services, HTM and clinical engineering consultant. With AAMI, I'm on the board of directors and serve as the vice chair for HTM.
Excellent. And if it works with everyone, we'll just move clockwise around the table.
Okay. Hello, everyone. My name is Heidi Horn, and I started a firm called Heidi Horn HTM Consulting, LLC, appropriately. And I'm also on the AAMI board of directors on the executive committee as a treasurer.
Oh, thanks, Brian. I'm Matt Baratich, and I am with Baratich Engineering, based in Fort Collins, Colorado, for a number of years. Recently, the last couple of years, I've had another hat. I'm an internal consultant to a group called Lower Mainland Biomedical Engineering in Vancouver, British Columbia. With AAMI, I think right at the moment, the only official thing is I'm on a standards committee, but lots of writing and projects over the years.
Yeah, Matt, you've worn a lot of AAMI hats.
Hello, everyone. Thanks, Brian, for including me in this interview this morning. My name is Janet Proust. I also have a small consulting company, St. Croix Standards Consulting, relatively new. Been involved with AAMI for many years, primarily focused in the standards area, hence the standards consulting. I recently retired from a big medical device manufacturer earlier this year. I also am on the board of directors, fortunate enough to be chair this year, and I'm really active in the AAMI Sterilization Standards group. I am co-chair of the Oversight Committee of Sterilization Standards Committee, and then I also serve as a co-chair for Working Group 3, which is Industrial Moist Heat or Steam Sterilization.
Great.
And more, but I don't need to go into all of that.
The exciting thing about having you all here is that you'll have somewhat diverse backgrounds, but you all have chosen for one reason or another to dive into the consulting side of this world. Heidi, you're the newest, I think, believe it.
Yeah.
When did this start?
So it started this year. I'm going to say April was my official, opening, and announced that I was going to be starting my consulting company. It's I'd like to think that I've been consulting my entire career, which is, I hate to say it, almost 30 years. But and I actually was formerly in a consulting role about 15 years ago. And so kind of got out of it, went into the business world, and was with a health system for also 20 years. And the consulting thing kind of came out of, you get to a point, and I think all of us are probably going to have some similar stories here, where you want to start, you see some things that you want to do, and you want to have that freedom to talk to people about what you want to talk to them about, and you want to, and you see some needs in the industry as well. And so, I think there's a lot of folks out there, I'm doing the HTM consulting, but there's a lot of folks out there who are just looking for some extra expertise or some help as well. What I have found, there's such a huge pile of work that keeps going on, most HTM people, and they're not getting more staff, and they're not getting more, help out there. And so where I come into play is to help them out with those projects or initiatives that they might just need that extra help that they don't have staff on or maybe don't have the expertise. So, again, it really just came out of a need that I saw out there for some help. And, I was talking with all of you earlier, and it's very nice to be your own boss, too, I will say. And I was kind of teasing with Matt. I said, I give myself high performance marks every single time. So, anyway.
No, and I should mention for our members and viewers who might not know, HTM, that stands for Healthcare Technology Management. Mm-hmm. So, the folks within hospitals who are repairing devices or maybe coming in as a third party to, in some cases, consult as well, right? Matt, I'm going to turn to you as the kind of senior consultant here. You've been doing it the longest. How long has Baratich Consulting been going on?
Yeah, I had to get out my calculator. I'm up to 26 years now.
26 years. No, that's amazing. And can you help us understand exactly, now Heidi already dived into this a little bit, but what is consulting? What do they do in most cases?
Well, I think Heidi did a really good job of explaining that there are times that people just need some extra help or some extra expertise because everybody's on the edge of just doing their regular jobs. And so when you can help out, it's reasonable to consider calling in a consultant. I mean, I was hesitating a bit there. I actually do two kinds of consulting. One is the HTM support consulting that's going to have some similarities with what Kurt and Heidi talk about. And maybe half of my time I also do incident investigation and litigation support in the case of medical device related incidents. So how did I get into it? It's because I just really like variety. I'm so much of an admirer of HTM leaders who can make a good HTM program run smoothly for years and years and years, and that's not me. I did that for a while, and I was mediocre at it, but I really much more enjoy coming in and seeing something to work on and help get it taken care of and move on to something else.
Right.
Yeah, now, is it fair to say that this is kind of one of the values then, is that you're a perspective outside of the box or outside of the silo of that specific institution?
I think there are times when, in addition to the reasons that Heidi and Matt mentioned, an institution may want a third party. Sometimes it's just having some validation or a third party perspective, and they may have the internal expertise, and maybe leadership isn't quite sure if this is the way to go or not, and they just need that studied or validated to sync up with what they're already thinking in-house and that they're going in a good direction.
Yeah, it's interesting sometimes how a independent voice seems to carry more weight in an institution than internal, right? Even though you may have this, the facility may have established or the company may have established a similar path or a similar report, right, addressing a particular project or an issue, having it independent seems to carry more weight. Not in all situations, but it's common for that.
Heidi,
it's seen as objective.
Right. Heidi mentioned resource constraints, and often if there may be some initiative or direction that requires resources, perhaps the institution wants some third-party validation, independent validation that before they invest however much they're being asked to invest.
Yeah, and I was going to add on to that, and I think I agree with all of you. It's sometimes, especially if you've been in a spot for a while, you've been there for years and years and years, you do tend to kind of get, I think, ingrained in this is how we do it. And, one of the things I can speak for all of us here is that we stay very in tune with what's going on in the industry, the changes that are occurring. That's part of our job, is to make sure that we're staying current and understand some of the outside things that are affecting the industry, but as well as, internal things that we have to be aware of. And so it's hard sometimes when, again, you're in the thick of it and you're doing your thing day in and day out and kind of just trying to hit those numbers or just trying to get your staff, to fill spots or whatever it might be. And so we kind of help provide that outside perspective and that more modern perspective in some cases of things that they just didn't have a chance to because they were so busy, and to be aware of. And I know, again, this it's just it's tough when you're in the thick of it to stay on top of everything that's going on. So,
and I'm going to cut to Janet here for a second because we're talking about staying relevant, staying on top of, I guess, best practices, and that makes me think of standards, of course. But I can also understand when an institution might not have the wherewithal, the bandwidth, whatever it may be, to stay on top of which standards they should be thinking about or they should be adhering to. You want to talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah. I look at it in that I think organizations look to hire external help, consultants, others for one of three reasons. One is because they don't have enough resource to do whatever it is that they need to do, whether it's a project. I think the second reason is skill sets. They may have resources, but maybe they don't have the specific skill sets, to be able to do the project. The third one is expertise. They often hire consultants that are, I'll say seasoned, very experienced, have a lot of background in a particular area that they may not have in that individual facility. And so bringing in somebody from the outside, in addition to the objectivity and, other opinion, it's very often because there's one of those three gaps of why they're going to do that. And so that's the first comment I wanted to make. The second one is that, yeah, it's really difficult to keep up with everything. Heidi alluded to it. Standards are included in that whole big bucket of things. In the past, my company has surveyed facilities, and one of the most difficult things to keep up with is the changes, right? The changes in standards, the changes in the regulations and in the codes, all of those requirements, let alone whatever changes they've made to their own internal processes and procedures. It's very, very difficult for facilities to keep up on that. And you're right. That's really our job. That's our value that we can bring into whoever be contracting us, whether it's a healthcare delivery organization or a medical device manufacturer or even the government for that matter. I mean, there's a broad use of consultants for a variety of reasons. It's not one size fits all, but a lot of needs out there that can be addressed by individual consultants based on their own expertise and skill sets.
Yeah, I think in healthcare. So I worked for an HDO for 20 years, and sometimes consultants have a bad connotation because a lot of times the health system would be bringing them in to basically reorganize, and do bad things according to the staff. And so they were almost looked at like, oh my gosh, we have the consultants are going to come here. That means there's going to be layoffs because they're going to come in. It's trouble, yeah. And again, I think it's important to, distinguish, the four of us here, is that that's not our role. We're not coming in and saying you need to change everything you're doing and this, that. I think, again, speaking for myself, it's to come in and help out. Help out with whatever it is whatever initiative you're trying to get done that you just don't have the time, the expertise, or whatever the case might be. And it's not necessarily I'm going to come in and change everything you're doing and tell you everything you're doing is bad. And I know all of you are the same way. So I don't know if you want to add to that.
I kind of want to tie back to something you said earlier, Brian. You're sort of defining, albeit very quickly, HTM, Healthcare Technology Management. You mentioned, equipment maintenance. And especially the M in HTM, it's so broad, right? There's so much more to HTM today than there were years ago, and so much more than maintenance. So strategic planning for the medical technology in a healthcare delivery organization, risk management, safety, recalls, cybersecurity, right? All of these concepts are there, and it's a lot for an in-house or an HTM team to be on top of all of that. So it's not uncommon for them to need some assistance, some expertise from outside folks, because HTM has really become a very complex, comprehensive, working with clinicians. Sometimes the consultants dive into a clinical workflow, and that may be medical staff that we bring in as part of our teams, part of our engagements with the clients.
Now, Kurt, you're on the other. You were once on the other side, on the inside looking out as opposed to the outside looking in, because you were with the VA. Is that right?
VA for many years.
Many years.
Decades.
Was there ever a time where you were bringing in consultants to stay up on things or anything of that nature?
Absolutely. Absolutely. For the reasons we're talking about. Augment the staff, bring in niche expertise, bring in third-party independent assessments. For all those reasons, we did. I'd also say that I think there's back to the, consultants are bad.
Yeah.
I think there's a legacy pride in biomedical field to, we can do things ourselves. We don't need the company, whether it be break, fix, maintenance, or, knowing processes to put together. And I think that's changed. I think there's a recognition with the growth and the complexity growth of healthcare technology, the technology itself and all that goes into managing the technology and adhering to standards, et cetera, that we can't do everything ourselves. We need others, whether it be the OEMs, whether it be independent service organizations, whether it be independent third-party consultant types, to come in and really help make sure that the technology is the right technology, right place, right time, safe, secure, et cetera, for delivery of care.
Oh, that's exciting. And so I didn't want to make this exclusively the HTM party. So Janet, I
That's
do
why
want to
I got
ask.
invited. I'm a token non-HTM person
the token
here.
sterilization.
If I could, before
Not
you go
the
to
first
Jen
time.
and
Oh, no,
dig
go
further
ahead.
into that, I just came from an FDA session, and they referred to standards that are
Right.
being updated that have a very direct, relationship and impact on the HTM folks. AAMI's EQ 56, for example, it's been in the works to be updated for quite some time, and it's soon to be republished in a new and exciting form, and it's going to have impact on the healthcare technology management community. So HTM, better be paying attention to standards, and Janet
Right.
can certainly attest to that, and she's even part of a session this week.
That's what I was going to say. You need to plug your session.
Yes.
I am. Tomorrow morning, 9:15. Be there.
Okay.
There we go.
Really, it's a presentation jointly that I'm doing with a colleague of mine, medical device manufacturer, and we have an invited panel. And it's really focused on how participating in standards development activities for the HTM can be a professional avenue and a professional career growth focus that will not only help improve the industry in general, but it can also personally benefit the HTM by participating with career growth. So it'll be very exciting. Got to be there. Got to be there.
And going back to the VA, when I was in the VA, one of the strategies we used, I think, quite effectively, as we were developing policy, we wanted to engage the frontline staff. And if you want to influence the policy as it's being built, get involved. And so I think that's very analogous to what Jan just said with standards. If you want to influence how the standard's written, how it's updated, how it's going to impact, the HTM community, get involved. Roll up your sleeves and lend your expertise to that development process.
I think that's a really important message to get out to the HTM community. Is it's so often that you hear at a meeting like this people complaining, somebody came up with this standard, and how the heck am I going to meet that with all of the other things that I have to do, and I don't understand it, and consider it a burden.
Right.
And what it really is just let's all start working on a problem, get the best solutions together from some kind of consensus building process, and get that out in front of people. And so the best way to do that is be part of it.
Right.
I mean, start to invent that, start to bring your experience of what best practices are, and be proactive. So when I hear those complaints, I tend to push back and say, well, you could be the solution to what you're complaining about.
Right.
Right on, Matt.
Right. And, I'll probably go down a rabbit hole on this one, but, we are talking about standards. And one of the biggest issues in healthcare technology management and healthcare in general right now is the cost, the rising costs and everything else. And everyone's looking for ways, how can we save money? And there's nothing that creates more cost than variation. And so what happens, especially in healthcare technology management, I think, we're all doing it a little bit differently. Mm-hmm. And I really saw the effect of this when before becoming doing this consulting, I worked for a CMMS company. And every client we worked with was doing things a little bit differently. And so, the CMMS had to be configured differently for everyone. They were looking at risk codes differently. They were looking at everything was different. And that adds cost. It adds cost in time. It adds cost in, just everything you're trying to put out there to support it. And so when you think about standards and having, we're going to do it this way, this is a best practice, and this is how we're going to do it, that is one of the best and probably easiest ways as an industry we can save money, honestly. And until we get to that point, we're not all unique and special. We have to get over that. Obviously every health system has its whether it's a teaching hospital or, pediatric hospital, whatever. There's some changes. But for the most part, we all are having to maintain the same equipment in the same way with the same regulations. And so we need to stop being snowflakes, honestly.
Janet, is it the same on the side for sterilization as well?
So sterilization's a bit different in a healthcare delivery organization because AAMI standards basically serve as the Bible. They're recognized by CMS relative to infection prevention. HTM-related standards, the EQ standards, are not there yet. Hopefully they'll get there. But it took a long time. When I first started participating in AAMI standards decades ago, it was sort of interesting because I had no idea what they were. I had no idea what impact that they had, but I had one of my regulatory people said, there's a meeting next week and I think you should go. So I did, and what I found out is that not only did those standards really impact, my company's products and processes, but it also impacted the customers that we sold them to. And back in those days, there would be maybe one person from the sterile processing department in a committee of 80, like one representative. But over the years, it really grew. And the reason that it grew so that there were more user participants, so those people who are actually working in the facilities that use these documents to do their job and run their processes, was because other sterile processing people influenced them and said, basically, you should start attending. So it can happen. I think that what's happened in the sterile processing area is a really good blueprint for what could potentially happen for HTM, both from the fact of getting those documents recognized by CMS so that then they become the requirement, but also having people start to participate from that user group and then encouraging others to participate. So we were like 1 out of 80 people, and now it's about 20 to 30% in some of the bigger committees, which is the kind of ratio that we really like to have.
And one of the really impressive things about both these communities, HTM, sterilization, and in the standards communities in general, is we were talking about career growth. We were talking about these folks who are networking with each other, they're learning, they're staying on top of things, just like you were talking about, which is important for consulting. When in one's career would they normally consider maybe transitioning over to this consulting line of work? Everybody's kind of chuckling.
Well, no, I was laughing because you asked me that earlier, and I said when you have money in the bank, because it starts out slow, and I think again you want to have the expertise. I mean, I guess anybody can be a consultant, but they're going to figure out pretty soon if you don't know what you're talking about, and so you need to have that background and kind of have that wide variety of information and everything else. And so that's why I think a lot of people do it later on in their careers, honestly. It just tends to, you've developed that experience and skill sets and everything else.
Maybe participated in some standards committees, right?
Exactly.
A level of recognition, right?
Right.
Somebody somewhere knows you,
right.
knows what you've done,
Exactly
that can serve as a reference or as basically sort of a lead, right? Say if they find someone or an organization that's having an issue and they can say, okay, well, this consultant might be able to help you out. I can connect you with them or contact them. I think that's a piece. I think it's also, for me personally, I loved my career with my manufacturer, right? It was a long career. I had such great experiences, saw the world, did lots of really, really good things, and I'm really grateful for that. But at this point in my career, I decided, I want to do what I really do best, and it's those things is that what you're really good at is usually what you really like, right?
It's true.
It's those two things, and so it gave me the opportunity to really just focus on the things that I really, really like to do, that are gratifying for me, and that I can provide a lot of value.
Go ahead, Kurt.
Yeah, I'm going to add a little bit there. I totally agree with all that, especially in the context of an independent consultant or a small consulting firm. But I've also seen an increase in the last probably decade or so of consulting firms that are larger. And it's a career path, can be right out of college or right out, for young professionals or mid-career professionals. Those firms offer services that we're talking about here. And they've got a cohort of expertise, and perhaps the junior consultants in the group don't have the same expertise that the senior consultants do. But together, they provide some valuable service and capabilities, certainly to the HTM community and other communities.
Yeah, I think there's some key difference sometimes between the larger organizations. They offer often, interim services like putting people in place to serve in those roles where there's vacancies, right, in positions. Smaller consultants, independent consultants, I think tend to be more project-based. We need this thing done, and you come in for that individual project. Not quite so much, I'm going to now become HTM department director for 2 years. That's not, smaller consultants tend not to do that because that basically ties you up and not really what the focus of the business plan is.
Some large organizations, healthcare delivery organizations, for example, will Well, contract for, I guess maybe we might be splitting hairs or semantics a little bit between a contractor or an outsourcing some services and consultants or consultation. But I think there are some processes that are regular and recurring that might be outsourced, and that could be a contractor / consultant that's providing those routine and repetitive services for a 3, 4, 5 year period to that customer, that client.
It seems like a big takeaway here is that consultancy, especially folks like you, you're here to help organizations stay agile, stay relevant, agile, on top of things. Not always the fixers, not always something is bad, which that seems an important takeaway.
Process improvement.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
for sure.
Great.
And again, as we already said, helping with those projects that they've been wanting to get to, then they just don't have the staff or the expertise to do it because staff is short.
This conversation we were just having reminds me, though, so I'm a one-person consulting company, have been the whole time. I think everybody at the table is as well. But sometimes there are jobs that are too big. So I don't think there's anything wrong with being a one-person consulting company. What I've found valuable is developing contacts with people who have complementary skills to mine, so that we can go in, 2 or 3 or 4 of us together and do a big project. And what I really, really value in those relationships is knowing people that I can trust. So I can just call up anybody at this table. I'd have no hesitation to say, here's the deal, you want to work on it, and if they say yes over the phone, I consider that's a signed agreement. We can go forward and do a collaborative effort.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, Matt. In my area, I need to have others that I can collaborate with because very often a project will be larger than one person can do. So whereas there's not a formal business arrangement, there's certainly an association and a collaboration with other consultants that I do in helping medical device manufacturers set up and address their standards programs.
Yeah, I think it's important for people thinking about going into consulting to know that, because they don't have to know everything.
Right.
They just have to know something well enough that someone would want to pay for them to tell about it. Yeah. But as long as you can put your expertise together with other people, you can match whatever the clients need.
Yeah, you're providing what the customer's needing.
Exactly.
Yeah, absolutely.
Collaboration, networking. These are all obviously incredibly valuable skill sets, and it's something that anyone who's here at AAMI eXchange is probably already using in real time right now. I don't want to take up any more of your time while we have this amazing conference to check out. So if everyone's okay, we'll wrap it up here. Any final thoughts from anyone?
No, I just want to thank you for the opportunity to come talk, and
thank you.
Yeah, we'll see everybody around the exchange.
Great conversation.
I very much enjoyed it.
Good.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Brian.
Thank you, Brian.